We're going to do a Q&A interview. Why don't you come in, Selena, and we'll, you have a very long bio, so I'm going to just very briefly talk about, she is now at SurveyMonkey, where she is Vice President of Engineering, which is the big job, very important job there. But she's also the founder of Evite, where she was, and also worked at Ticketmaster and a whole bunch of other companies. I could go into them in great detail, but she also, importantly, holds a Bachelor of Computer Science from Stanford University, which is the top place to get that, one of the top places. And so we're going to talk a little bit for about 15 minutes and then have questions from the audience, because she's a really good person. Her boss, Dave Goldberg, who's a very good friend of mine, wrote me last night and said I can't be mean to her. That's too bad, Dave. No, I won't be mean to her. It's just to him. And was singing her praises about what a terrific hire he made back in 2009, I think it was. So let's talk a little bit about your beginnings. You went to Stanford. Hey, noisy people in the back. Hush up back there. You went to Stanford. Give a little bit about your background and why you went where you went. And
yeah, so I was always into computer science. I mean, I was pretty much coding since I was about 9 or 10 years old.
Can I ask why? Why was that? What promoted that for you?
So for me, a lot of it was just in my household, because my dad was a technologist and started off as a technologist and eventually went into management. But I mean, I just had kind of computers and technology surrounded me pretty consistently, and I just loved it. Mm-hmm. And so I started coding at a young age. My mom would like drive me to like computer science summer camps, which was pretty dorky, but that's okay. And
talk a little bit about your parents' support, because a lot of women who are successful, I've noticed, have especially fathers who are very supportive, mothers and fathers, but that they get constant reinforcement from the parents about doing that instead of non-enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, I think as most people know, I mean, my Indian parents are pretty aggressive on education. So,
right.
So you know, it was a really big deal in my household. You know, my parents had come to this country as immigrants with, you know, not very much, and then worked extremely hard to provide for us, and did extremely well. You know, and so saw sort of especially with my dad, like using technology to become an extremely successful business person. And so I think witnessing that, as well as the support they gave me, was really important for me from a career perspective, right from the beginning to even to
Were
today.
there any did you feel social pressures? Because there's an age around 9 or 10 where girls do shift from science. It's quite documented.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's one of the big problems today, is that, you know, you have women and girls pretty much who aren't willing to do math and computer science. I mean, our general counsel was telling me a story about her 10-year-old who's literally the best kid in math in her class. And she said to her, and they were watching, I had done this Bloomberg interview, and she was watching it, and she said, oh, you know, do you want to go into computer science? She goes, oh, well, girls aren't good at math. And it was like, well, okay, you're 10, how did you get that impression?
Right.
And so, you know, I think that is a big problem for me. For whatever reason, I was just so impassioned by technology. It never really affected me. I mean, I was a nerd and I couldn't really change that. So I was just sort of rolling with it.
So you embraced the nerd, the inner geek. So you moved on to Stanford, got a computer science degree, very place where tons of startups were started. Google, many others.
It was, I mean, and when I was leaving, it was the time of startups. It was Yahoo, Excite. I mean,
yeah.
So it wasn't, yeah.
Yeah. So so when you were there, what did you think you were going to do with your computer science degree?
So, you know, it was a pretty big choice at that time, which was, do I go out and do something and start something? And there was just so much going on. I mean, there was like Trilogy constantly recruiting, US Web. I mean, all of these different, you know, companies like selling you the moon in terms of what was going to happen. And, but, you know, I really, and my co-founder, who's a guy, we really wanted to start something. And we actually didn't really have an idea, but we were determined to start something. And we went through product and put it out there, and product. At one point, we had more products than employees.
So give me an idea of what.
So we had one product, which was called Collage, where you could like take different clippings from all over the web and create like your first My Excite page. And we actually licensed it to Excite for a horrible amount of money. And then they said they couldn't launch it for copyright. But it was literally like the first initial view of kind of your My page. And then we launched Evite. We launched so many different products to try to see what would succeed.
And you recommend that, the idea of throwing a lot up on the wall and seeing what sticks?
No. I think that it's much better to have focus if you can, but I do think it's important to be able to pivot. Like if you have a really good team and you have a really good partner, which is for me the most vital thing, if you can say, okay, this quite isn't working, let's pivot and try this, let's pivot and try this, and you can wear that from a sort of just family and life perspective, then go for it, because it is a good way to try to see and maneuver and see what's going to actually work. I mean,
Excellent.
Pinterest took a long time.
Lots of them.
Yeah.
Twitter was something else. Instagram was called Bourbon and was a very bad company until it was Instagram, because that was what was working.
Right.
That was working. So talk about Evite. So you started Evite. Now, why did that stick from your perspective?
So, I mean, I think the key with Evite, and even if you look at SurveyMonkey, it's one of the key things about both of them is that they're naturally viral. So, consumer acquisition is one of the most difficult things to do with any product you launch. And with Evite, it was naturally, you would have one invitation going to an average of 19 different people, and then those people would actually see the product. And then how did you convert those people into becoming creators? And that's exactly the same challenge with SurveyMonkey. You have one survey going out, and how do you take the recipients of the survey and get them to convert? And having a naturally viral organic business is a huge benefit in terms of trying to grow. And that was what we saw with Evite. I mean, I actually, we had launched it, and it was on this Dell computer underneath my desk that was literally $299, and I'm extraordinarily clumsy. And I stood up and kicked the cable out. And we literally had no idea how much Evite had grown until our phone started ringing. People were like, what happened to Evite? I need to send my party invitation.
Right, wow.
And so we looked in the database, and it had really grown.
Right. So what, in terms of when you were starting the company, what were some of the key mistakes you made? I mean, I think there's great, people say, oh, I did this right, I did this right. What did you do wrong?
So we did a lot of things wrong. With our first product, like I mentioned, we licensed it to Excite with this clause in there that basically said that they had a perpetual license until launch, and then it turned out they couldn't launch it, and so we literally couldn't sell it. So it was like the worst business deal, and we were two computer scientists with no business background. And finally, my dad sat us down and was like, you guys need to get some business help. You guys need to bring in a CEO. And we did, and we brought in Josh Silverman, who was later running Skype. And it was a huge difference. So and Michelle mentioned it as well, but finding that right, mix of talent is really vital. And that was one of the biggest mistakes that we made. And I think secondly, is we raised $37 million for online invitations. That's just nuts, and so.
Could you not resist the millions that were being tossed at you?
Yeah, I mean, everybody was raising money, and people, and it was and we had great investors. It was, August Capital, Greylock, great investors. So it was yeah, of course we'll take your money. And they were, at the time, were saying to us well, how can you spend it? Put a billboard on 101. Hire as many people as quick as possible. And it was why aren't you spending our money faster? But, looking back, it's and I think that a lot of companies faced it at that time, which is, it is important first to focus on growing your customer base and your consumer acquisition, and I don't necessarily think you need to monetize from day one, but at least having the understanding of your model and how you're going to monetize is important.
Well, or not using the money, which is interesting. Several of the more successful companies didn't use all the money they raised, eBay being one.
And we didn't either. When we sold, we had a lot of it left.
Right. And so, but when you were doing these meetings, you would advise not just taking as much as you need, or?
I think that it's important to there is an advantage to taking as much as you can get as long as you're getting the right valuation, and that was part of it, which was then when we looked at it, to get a decent return for our investors, you need to get, at least a certain amount X over what you've received. And the question is then, can your company grow to be that big?
Right, which is again a problem once again today. There's now, I think, $153 billion companies in Silicon Valley.
Right.
About one of which is worth probably $1 billion. Probably SurveyMonkey, which was just valued at $1.3 billion. Yes. And that was actual cash in the door, which is interesting. Talk about now doing this, what you're doing here. Why did you not found a company? You went to SurveyMonkey.
Yeah, so I'm running at SurveyMonkey Product Engineering.
You moved to Ticketmaster when they bought it.
And So here at SurveyMonkey, what really drove the decision for me, one is when I was
Just for a second, everyone who doesn't know, SurveyMonkey is not a monkey. It has nothing to do with monkeys. It is a survey company, an online polling and survey company. It's terrific, and it's one of these quiet little companies that is very successful quietly.
I would assume most of you ever see one. We are looking at our stats, and literally 1 out of 300 Americans has sent a SurveyMonkey survey.
Okay.
So it's a pretty impressive company. But I decided in October 2000 or June 2009 that I wanted to come back to the Valley. I was living in Europe, running European product and technology for Ticketmaster, and I was looking at all different opportunities. Really early stage where I was looking at more CEO opportunities, looking at sort of, is there a right company to found? And I had a bunch of ideas, and I'd even pitched some to different people and gotten advice from different people here, and then I found out I was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Would you just find out? What do you,
well, yeah.
sort of like a Virgin Mary thing going on.
No. We were, but we knew we wanted to start a family, but kind of during the interview process, I was like, oh gosh, it worked. And so I was trying to figure out what was the best thing to do at that time. And SurveyMonkey for me was just absolutely the perfect fit. One is I absolutely love the product. I mean, we are trying to use data to help people make better decisions in tons of different ways. I mean, people literally use our product from how should I name my baby to trying to get parent-teacher surveys, feedback about their classrooms, to employee engagement. And the product is just awesome. And then the team and people were awesome. You had mentioned Dave Goldberg, and he's just fantastic. And then also just bringing, in terms of a place where, because we were profitable, and we, although we're really small, there were 20 people when I joined, we did have the opportunity to create a company that I could shape the culture of as well, where we could create a work-life balance. And that was really important for me at the time, because I was about to be a new mom.
Right. And talk about that a little bit, because many people do focus on it, but it is a big issue for women. And Dave happens to be married to Sheryl Sandberg, who's coming out with this book called Lean In, talking about the problems. Do you think about that a lot? Is it only women that should be thinking about these issues of these work-life balance? Because most entrepreneurial activities take 24/7 kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think, the problem is no matter what you say, which is that, women, men should be equal in parenting and so forth, there's like no doubt that there is more impact on the female. Like, you give birth, you're the one pregnant, and then you're feeding most likely. Like, It is just much more impact on the female.
I know what you mean.
And so it's like, so you have to consider it, and you have to consider it more than men. I mean, men have done early stage companies, and I'm not saying you can't, but it is a very hard thing to do both. And I want to go found another company later, but when my kids are a little bit older.
And in terms of, we're going to get to questions in a second, in terms of what you think the most important, when you're getting to the idea of scaling or building a big business, what do you think 3 key criteria people, women in particular, should think about?
So for me, I think the key things, one is really figuring out on your platform, which is how do you optimize the experience. So we've done a huge amount of A/B testing and optimization to figure out how do you convert those users when they come in and come to the door. Even at Evite, I remember one of the big differences we made was, like, at the time there was this, everyone was displaying their email address, which in 1999 was fine. And we had a little link next to the name that said, do you want to see your name here instead of your email address? And that just drove up our registrations. And again, we were doing it to 20%, 30% of the audience. And I think that that's a key. Secondly is obviously international. At SurveyMonkey, we're still about over half of our revenues are still coming from the US, but our growth rate internationally is over 50% in some markets. And we made a huge effort in 2010 and 2011 to localize into 15 different languages and launch 28 different currencies. And as an example, in Brazil, when we launched a new language, we saw an immediate 20% uptick in the take rate and the traffic. And so I think thinking about your business globally from the start, especially from when you're doing your development, like how are you going to internationalize and localize, is vital, because trying to retrofit your application backwards is very difficult.
Absolutely.
And then, obviously now I think the third big thing is thinking about mobile and how people are using you in a mobile sense. Again, we're talking about like the BRIC countries, but China is going to surpass US without a doubt in terms of the number of smartphone usage. And, and then you need to think about in a place like India, which is a huge market, they have so much feature phone usage still. So how are you going to attack that? And I think that when you're thinking about starting to get to that scale, you have to think both other platforms and international.
Almost from the beginning.
But you have to think about it from the beginning from an application development perspective.
Right, absolutely. Any personal tips you'd like to give? From you?
In terms of scaling the companies?
Yeah.
I mean, again, I feel like the people are the absolute key. We've grown our company from 20 people to 200 in the last 3 years, and finding the right people who both can, as Michelle said, believe in the vision but also execute, I think are key. And it's finding that talent here in the Valley is obviously a challenge because it's so competitive, but I think when you do and you build the right culture, that's what's going to help you the most when you're scaling your company.
Great, terrific. Questions from the audience? Please stand up. Okay, right there. Go ahead.
I have been tinkering around with engineering stuff since I was probably 7. Got a CS degree from Berkeley, and now run Women Who Code SF, our Rails group. Yet I've seen women drop out from every stage of the process for really the most random reasons. And Sheryl Sandberg talks a lot about how to solve this problem later in life. What do you think we can do for the earlier women, the young women in maybe high school and college?
So it's about dropouts, yeah.
I mean,
That's a big issue, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the pipeline problem to me is humongous in terms of how do you get more and more women into technology and computer science and even get them to then continue on with that. I don't have a clear solution for it. If I try to help as many. I met the Goldie Blocks founder, and she's just super passionate about that vision of using a physical icon to try to change that. I think a lot of it stems also in the education system, and our education system in the United States is fairly broken. So I think it is a huge challenge, and it's not going to be one answer, but it's going to be looking at the education system, creating the right icons in society, creating role models for people in society, as well as figuring out university programs. So Stanford has not been able to get more women into computer science, but they've tried to create tracks and promoting HCI, human computer interaction, as one of the tracks, which is one of the few tracks that is attracting a lot more women. So I think that it's a lot of different things along the way to try to get women to stay in it, but there's no easy answer.
And the drop-off is concerned. I think it was 30% 10 years ago. Now it's 17% graduates, I think, in MIT and others. It's dropped in half.
It's dropping, not increasing.
Yeah, okay.
Hi there. Is this one on?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, it is. All right.
This one on?
Hi, Selena. All right, so I have a quick comment on that last one, and then I have a real question. I have a daughter who's in kindergarten, and one of the things, the stereotypes that we build in is she came home from school yesterday, and she said, every single person at school today told me that I look cute, and she was so happy about it. She had her 2 pigtails and whatever, and I go, well, what did you say back to them? And she's like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, one of the things you could say is, well, thank you, but did you know I'm a good student and a really hard worker too? So I didn't want her to, get all of her value from people saying she's cute. So anyway, that's my real question is actually about the other end of the spectrum, the really experienced women. And Kara, you mentioned you are involved in something about getting more women on board seats.
Yeah.
I wanted to say
I write about it. I write about it all the time.
Excuse me?
I write about it all the time. I note it. I mean, just calling attention to it is what
So
I
I
do.
wanted to find out, who are the right candidates to put forward. I think there's very few women like Selena who have seen so much success and have so much respect in the industry. And I first want to know, Selena, if you've actually considered board positions. And then I also wanted to comment that I know a ton of people out there who are 20-year veterans of the industry, but because they have been raising families and things like that, they don't have the fancy titles, they don't have the senior vice president, but they know a lot about business and could probably advise
So,
small
do you get
companies.
asked on a lot of boards?
some, but not that many.
I got to tell you, it's fascinating. She would say that because my partner Megan Smith is a vice president at Google. Never gets asked on boards. It's fascinating, and she's in charge of business development there. I know. It's astonishing. It's fast. It's that's the kind of thing. But you don't get asked. Why is that? Do you think?
I mean, I think a lot of it is now there's a lot of people trying to put more attention on it. Yourself, obviously, right. Cheryl, obviously, and I think that will help. But it is if there's not any women in the room saying you should add a woman on the board, I don't think people know how to. I mean, I don't really know.
It's really interesting because there's super qualified women. If you can ask, it's a good question. They've just got to pay attention to it and bringing attention to it. Just one second. I'm just going to let her ask very brief, quick question, then we're going to a coffee break.
Sure. Hi, my name is Shannon Broderick. I just was curious to hear a little bit more about how you guys grew SurveyMonkey in the beginning, sort of what your main distribution channel was for that company.
The main distribution channel for SurveyMonkey in the beginning.
In terms of the acquisition channel for consumers?
That's right, how you guys grew the company initially.
So the company has an extraordinarily interesting history. It literally never took funding. The founder started it, and because of just the viral nature of it, he was able to grow it very organically. But it took 10 years to get to a point where we've been able to kind of triple that in the last 3 with optimizing the site a lot. And then also, I think search engine optimization is a huge growth channel for us, especially internationally. And we've done a certain amount of SEM, but SEO has really been vital for us to succeed because there's a really long tail on a bunch of different terms, employee feedback, healthcare feedback, and trying to grow that way has been really important for us.
Great. Okay, so now I have this thing. Just wait a second, Selena. After the Q&A, we're going to take a short 5-minute seated break. This sounds rather fascist here. I'm just reading what they're giving me here. I think you should jump up if you want to. But if you need to use the restroom, not kidding, don't be quick, but stay seated. You can, and then the pitch SF. Anyone who's had a baby after 39 like myself can get up and do whatever they want. But, that's a woman joke, man. You're not going to get that, but it's very funny. So next up is the Pitch SF. And again, Selena is terrific. She's really a wonderful entrepreneur. And frankly, I think you should be running the company. I'm going to call Dave right now. Honestly, you're much smarter than he is. Anyway, thank you very much.